So I actually took the liberty of changing my presentation last night because I asked Tom a little bit more about the kind of companies that are here. And I realized that I was initially focusing on just platform products, which is really a runtime product. Things like, we've got Zach here, was it MySQL, and that was a database is a good example of a runtime system for developers. So certainly products that developers use, but a platform product is a special kind of developer product. Many of you are also working on other kinds of products for developers, like developer tools, developer services. GitHub would be an example where it's developer time, it's not runtime, and that's where, although in Heroku's case it's kind of both. That's a different class of product, and so I was going to. I thought what I'd do instead is talk about both, and I won't go as deep into the platform services. Well, just quick show of hands. How many of you are working on APIs, runtime services? Okay. Third of you or so, and I'm assuming the rest of you are working on developer tools or services. Well, some of you may just be working on other kinds of products and are hoping there's some things that are relevant. We'll see. But at least I'll make sure to talk about some of those things that really make platform services hard, and they are hard. We'll talk about why. So just a little bit about me for those that I haven't had the chance to meet yet. I was confessing to Tom earlier that my favorite kind of product is developer products. I've been hooked on them since I started my career. I did start as a developer at HP Labs, and that is, for those that don't know, it's in Palo Alto. That was sort of a different era of HP. They were doing a lot of innovation back then, and it was a great place to learn how to be a developer. And I worked in the software technology lab, so tools, languages, development environments, runtime services, that was what we were doing. Now that was in the era of PC software. That was before the internet. So we were doing desktop mostly, but client-server stuff too, but just PC-based software. And maybe the most important thing about my time there is about halfway through my time at HP, I worked on a team. It was actually an awesome team. Really all the members of the team went off and had great careers. One of them was the original and still current chief architect of TiVo. A couple of them are principal engineers now at Google. They're just some really good engineers. The problem was we worked for over a year on this system and released it, and nobody wanted to buy it. And it was a very sort of depressing experience because that was the first time that happened to me. But I will say it did open my eyes to this other world, which was, up until then, honestly, I was just focusing on what most developers focus on, building a great product. But I realized that it doesn't really matter how great your engineering capability is, how good your team is. I really don't care if they're not given something worth building. And so that I got very interested in not only how we built it and the way we built it, but what we built. And so that I learned there was this other area called product. And in product, we are responsible for making sure it's something that people actually want to use and can figure out how to use, not just that we can deliver it. So it did change the course of my career. I'm happy to say after that flop of a product, I never worked on anything that was that kind of failure again. Some things were more successful than others. But I really learned that there were techniques that you can use to increase your odds of success. And I won't go into too much about that other than to say I got very, very lucky because basically some of the earliest developers at Netscape were from the group I was in, and I got introduced to Mark Andreessen. I got a chance to work for Mark. There was already a browser team at Netscape, and soon there was a server team doing web servers and mail servers and directory servers, but I was brought in to run platform and tools. So that's really what we're talking about, developer products. In addition, I had the developer program, developer evangelism, platform evangelism. To me, this was a dream job, and to be honest, I'd still be doing that today if we hadn't been acquired by AOL after about 5 years. It was a fabulous place because we were really asked to figure out what should the platform for the internet be. How do you go from, basically Microsoft provided the platform for PCs, but with the advent of the internet, it was different. We had to figure out what should run in a browser, what should run on servers, how many tiers should there be on servers, how do you handle millions of users? These were all, how do you do rich applications? A company down the street actually here that I just fell in love with called Macromedia did things like Flash. Flash isn't cool today, but back then it was awesome because we couldn't do anything like that with simple HTML. And so plugins were on that team, and it was JavaScript guys were on the team, SSL guys were on the team. It was a really great place to do platform products. And I loved this idea of a whole new generation of platform. Anyway, I would say that most of the techniques that we use today, you can track a lot of it to the Netscape days because we were kind of forced. We were really the first ones that were forced to revisit how we build products because basically the Microsoft way didn't work too well for the internet. We figured that out pretty quick, and then we had to figure out better ways of doing it. Anyway, eventually AOL bought us, and I kept a lot of the same team here. It was in Mountain View, and AOL's based in the East Coast, but there was really a technology team doing the platform for AOL and then Time Warner services. But to be honest, very quickly, I didn't like that whole setup with AOL, but one of the companies I got to meet through the developer program at Netscape was this great product guy, Pierre Omidyar, who was the co-founder of eBay. And I really loved what they had started, and I was recruited to be their basic original head of product and design at eBay. Now, that was actually the first time in my career that I did an application, other than sort of toys and helping other companies. I had always done plumbing or infrastructure products for developers, and this was the first time I was doing something for consumers. And that actually attracted me because I felt like eBay was the first real application built on top of the internet. I mean, there were lots of early apps, but that was the first large-scale example. And I found that really interesting. How do you build a community and an app on top of, eBay couldn't have happened before the internet. And we started a platform effort there among many other efforts, but after eBay, I just started, I'd done several companies, spent a lot of time recruiting and interviewing people and building products, and at that point I wanted to just advise mostly startups, and that's basically what I've been doing for the last 10 years. And I still have this real affection for platform companies. So I think the way I was introduced to HeavyBit was through Heroku, which many of you may know. It's a very cool platform company that's James is also from. So that's who I am. That's really why I love platform and tools. I thought I'd spend a few minutes talking about what sort of the keys are for successful products for developers. Obviously, to be honest, those who know me, it takes me 2 long, solid, fast-talking days to get through what I think are the most essential techniques. So I'm just going to give you maybe a sample of the most important points. I tried to pick some points, 10 points that are a little counterintuitive, so maybe cause you to think a little bit about some of the things you're doing. Maybe you're already doing these things, maybe not. So think about them. And that's the purpose here. Like I said, I'm going to talk about 2 kinds of products. Platform products, which I'm defining here as services that are used to actually run another, like we have, I think, a mobile payments startup here. There's an example like a database software would be that, runtime services, or I just left the offices of an awesome platform company called Pocket. It's formerly known, read it later. They have a platform that's used by lots of companies to share and time shift content. That's an example of a real platform play. And then I'll also talk about developers, tools, and services. There's some teams that are doing monitoring systems, analytics systems, incident tracking systems, developer tools. Those would all be developer tools and services. All right, so with that, let me jump in here and throw the first one out you. And I would say this is probably the most important point of all, really, for product people, is to know, basically stop trying to think you can know what features you need to build. And instead, sort of come to the point where at least I've come to, which is assuming most of my ideas are wrong. They're not going to work. I call them the two inconvenient truths of product. The first one is at least half of our ideas are just not going to work. When I say not going to work, that actually it's rarely because it doesn't work technically. The most common reason I see that our ideas don't work is because you put it in front of the developers and they just say, not worth it, not interested, just not, they don't use it, they don't use it. You can see that from the analytics. They don't use it. If they don't choose to use it, or they don't buy it. And usually because they just are not as excited about that idea as we were. But that's probably the most common reason ideas don't work. Sometimes they can, they think it is valuable, but they try to use it, and then they realize it's so complicated they'd have to get some training or they'd have to read some documentation, and they just say, not worth it. I don't have time. Life is too short. It's not worth the trouble. I see that as probably the second most common reason ideas don't pan out. And the third is probably feasibility, meaning sometimes it truly isn't technically possible for us to do what we want. More often, it's just not worth the time. It's not that it's impossible, it's just that it would take 4 months to build that feature, and it's just not worth 4 months of time. You don't have that much time. So you decide not to do it there. So for whatever reason, at least half of our ideas are not going to work. The other inconvenient truth, the sort of the other punch there, is that, and of the ideas that can work, that really could, it will typically take at least 3 or 4 iterations before it, sometimes people like the phrase time to money. Time to market is largely irrelevant for us. Time to money is what matters. In other words, time, and again, when I say time to money, some of the services we do you're not actually charging for directly, but again, it's time until it actually does what it was supposed to do. And that's going to take at least 3 or 4 tries. So this point is just to say, know what you can't know. You can't know at the time you conceive this idea if it's going to be something that's really used. You can't really know how much they're going to pay for it. This is why the whole idea of business cases is so ludicrous, the way most teams do them. Because the problem is they have an idea, so they do a ROI analysis. You've probably all seen the spreadsheets. There's actually nothing wrong with the spreadsheet. It's a very simple spreadsheet. You can get it off the internet, several different flavors, several different ways. The problem is not the spreadsheet. The problem is it's all garbage in, garbage out. We have no idea at the time that teams are filling that out and making their business case and their business plans, they have no idea how much money it's going to make, if it's going to make anything. They don't even know it's a positive number. They literally don't. But they make up some number. And then the other problem is they have no idea what it's going to cost. Again, because they haven't even fleshed out the solution yet. So they do these business cases or ROI analysis, and it's just a joke. Now, it's not actually bad necessarily to do a case, but you can't do it then. You have to, again, know what you can't know. You can't know this stuff yet. This is where I realized that after the fact I don't have a whiteboard or anything, but there is, I should talk about something called dual track agile. I don't know how many of you know the term, but the idea of dual track agile is that I'm assuming all of the teams here essentially are using some flavor of agile, whether it's Scrum or Kanban or some of your own flavor. If that's not a safe assumption, tell me, because I want to try to convince you that's crazy. You need to be. But assuming you are, that just talks about how we build and deploy software. It doesn't talk about how we conceive and validate software. That's where dual track comes in, that there's basically a delivery track and a discovery track. The point is, if you want to do a business case, fine. Do it, though, after you've done discovery. I'm going to talk a lot more about discovery if that's not a term that's familiar to you. So anyway, first big point, know what you can't know. You can't know if this idea is any good, and you can't know how expensive it's going to be to build it. We have to figure that out fast. And honestly, that's the difference. In good teams, we can figure those two things out fast. This is another big one. And this is this particular subtlety when doing developer products. It's one of the hardest things about doing developer products. And this is a tricky one where I have to actually separate platform products from developer tools. Because in developer tools, the developers are the users, and the developers are the customers. In a platform service, developers are not the customers, developers are not the users. They're more like a partner with you. But like in a mobile payments API, the developers are building that payment solution into an application, but it's the actual people trying to buy something that are the real users. And anyway, keep that point in mind. We'll come back to that. This point, though, is getting this idea that you need to know what your customers can't know. And this is why, for example, we don't do, and I hope none of you do things like focus groups, the whole market-driven product, sometimes people call it, or actually marketing-driven product is what we use to refer to that. The point here is that there's really two big issues. Before he died, Steve Jobs would hold up his iPhone and say, "You can conduct 100 focus groups, you will never get an iPhone." That's what he was trying to explain, this problem right here. And that is that our customers don't know what they want. And they can't know what they want. They might think they do, but just like we can't, they can't either. And there's really two big reasons for this. The first is that most of them, now I'm going to give two variations here, one for platform, one for developer tools, but most of them don't know what's possible. It's not that they couldn't know what's possible if they're developers. Developers typically do work closely with technology, but not this technology. The reason they're using you for a content management system is because they don't want to deal with content management system. They're building their own product, and so they're using you. They're counting on you to be an expert in CMS systems, and that's where. So number one, they don't know what's possible, and number two, and this applies not just to your developer customers, it applies to all of us, which is none of us really know what we want until after we see it. This is especially with software. We see it, now we can interact with it. And by the way, this was never more true, and still is never more true than with Apple, because of all the companies I've ever been in, Apple does more prototypes than anybody I've ever seen. The biggest reason why is this: you can't really know what you want until after you see it and play with it. So you've got to know what your customers don't know. Now, I always have to be careful here, because please don't interpret this as don't talk to your customers, don't talk to your developers. That's the worst thing you can do. In fact, the only way I know really around this is to go out and talk to lots of developers, lots of customers. And we'll talk about how. I don't really want you to talk to them. I want you to test them, but I want you to test your ideas on them. But it's really, you've got to talk to a lot of them. Just know what they can't know. Okay, so what do most teams do? Most teams have some sort of, if it's a startup, it's usually a whiteboard somewhere. If it's a bigger company, it's on some kind of spreadsheet somewhere, or some wiki or some tool to basically prioritize features, prioritize work. And they'll take those things and they'll usually put them in something we call a roadmap. Most of you have probably used the term. Most of you probably have roadmaps. The reason I don't like roadmaps, actually, is because it leads to that first issue. When we put things on a roadmap, well, actually, to be honest, there's nothing really wrong with a roadmap. The problem is that people think in your company, they think that if you put it on a roadmap, you're going to do it. That's the problem. If they didn't have that baggage associated with it, it really wouldn't be an issue. It's just a list then. But it's not. When you call it a roadmap, they say, okay, it says in May I'm going to get this. So, right? I need to deliver it. The problem with that is we're locking ourselves into solutions that if you do roadmaps, I can pretty much guarantee you that you're going to waste at least half your time. At least. Probably a lot more. Waste your time, meaning you're going to build and deploy stuff that is not going to achieve its objectives. For the reasons I just said, the first two reasons. So rather than roadmaps, well, that's where this notion of dual track agile comes in, where there is discovery. On the top track is discovery, and discovery is where we're actually figuring out what things to build, and not how to build it necessarily, although the developers, as you're going to see, discovery is developers, designers, and product owners. Those are basically the people that do discovery. But their job is to quickly take these ideas, quickly. I mean, there is a clock ticking. I'm a big fan of something called the 2-week rule. That says that you're going to validate your ideas in no longer than 2 weeks. At Facebook, they call it the don't fall in love rule. The point is, after 2 weeks, you're going to be too attached to these ideas. So when I say quick, I really mean quick. You need to be able, and good teams can do this in a couple days. They can take an idea, put it in a form that they can validate on their real users and customers and make sure if it's works the way they hoped it would work, and probably won't, so they'll have to iterate. Now, we've got lots of ways to do that validation. It would literally take me a solid day to talk about just my favorite techniques in product discovery. But let me just say that normally it's around prototypes. There are several flavors of prototypes, 4 main kinds of prototypes. The first 2 are simulations. They don't really do anything. This would be useful for things like a developer tool, but not so useful for things like a developer API, a platform API. That's going to be the third type. The first 2, though, the simulations, they're all fake, but you could do things like, I know one of the teams is working on an incident tracking system, or another one's working on some visualization of monitoring. Those things, you can absolutely use realistic but totally fake data, not live data. And you can actually help people see, or you can test and develop enough to see that people, are they going to understand this data? Do they understand that there's a different issue here, or what's going on, or what the workflow is? That's where we use the 2 kinds of simulation prototypes. They're considered low fidelity, high fidelity are the 2 main options. Low fidelity just means it's basically a wireframe. High fidelity means it looks like the real product you're proposing. It's got a design. And these are great for learning. You can't send live traffic there. That's what we're going to use the next one for. But you can put it in front of developers and tell them, look, I want you to create an incident, or I want you to create a bug, or I want you to tie a bug to a configuration, and I want you to test, or whatever. And you can see if they can do what they need to do. And the third kind of prototype is one that is my favorite one for platform teams. It's called a live data prototype. A live data prototype is just enough of the real code, just enough that you can send Okay, there's two dimensions to a live data prototype. It's sort of an oversimplification of the term. One is it actually goes to real data sources. So if it's an incident tracking system and you're asking if you want to see if they can find the incident, or a mobile payment, actually you can do a transaction. It actually will go to real data. The other dimension is, can you send real traffic to it? For maybe a mobile payment, it's less obvious how you would use that as it is for, say, a SaaS service where you would send some real user traffic straight to it. You can still do it with mobile apps, though. I can talk about that in a bit. And I just want to emphasize, a live data prototype, it's a fraction of the work. You don't do automated tests. You don't do a bunch of SEO work. You don't do a bunch of performance work, scale work, maintainability work. You're not productizing it. You're just doing enough that you can see if it does the job in terms of does it work? Does it do what people are expecting? We very often will do APIs. Sometimes we'll just start with a stub, which is literally the same as a user prototype, but most of the time we'll do something so that the developers we're going to work with can actually try it out and see if it does what they were hoping. So, and then the fourth kind of prototype is just a feasibility prototype. A feasibility prototype is what we do to find out if we're not sure something is actually possible, or we know how to solve it. Or the most common example I see for feasibility prototypes is for performance, like a big data problem, and we're not sure that we can actually return some results in a reasonable time. So we do a feasibility prototype to try it out on some real data and see what's going on, if it's good enough. So those are kind of the four main prototyping techniques we use, but the purpose of discovery is to quickly come up with solutions where we have real evidence, really, of three things. First of all, that people will want to use it. Second is they can figure out how to use it. And the third is that we can deliver it when we need it. Feasible, valuable, usable, feasible. And that my point is, get good at discovery. Don't worry so much about roadmaps. I don't want to mislead you. There are a few things that are on your roadmap that really do need to be there. An example is if you have some contract with Google or Yahoo to get some deal, and they're trying to run their business, you're trying to run yours. You need to have some sync up of things. Those kinds of commitments are what we will typically put on a roadmap. And that's where feasibility comes in, because we have to, most of the time with feasibility, it's not really, is it possible? This is when it needs to be done in order to be viable. Like I work with an awesome e-commerce company very close to here called ModCloth. Some of you may know ModCloth. It's all about the holiday season. And they can't, in e-commerce, you can't move Christmas. It's going to happen. Same time, that's a realistic constraint. So that will drive a lot of when things are done and when something's feasible. If feasibility really means, is it going to be ready for this holiday season, or would it have to wait till the next one? Okay, so discovery over roadmaps, that's a huge point. Data over opinions. That's actually, data beats opinions is one of the Google mantras. I'm a big fan of this. I was happy to see actually there were a couple of the teams working here that were essentially making data more accessible, more visible, more understandable. Love that. I think the world desperately needs that. And what this is trying to say is, if you're having endless meetings in a conference room like that and constantly debating what you should do, whether it's the way a feature should be built or what the design should be, or even if you should even go in this direction, what you want to do really is stop that. You want to just move to, how do we craft a test, run something quickly, collect some data, and make that decision. That's really gets to the point I'll talk about later around culture, but that's what you really want to try to move to, one where you are making your decisions quickly and you're making them based on data. That is, it's a bit of a mindset change. There was a great deck recently, a company I work with in Brooklyn called Etsy. Many of you probably have heard of Etsy. So you guys know Etsy. Etsy is an awesome team. It's an awesome team, and they shared recently how they've really changed how they design based on this point, using data to drive the decisions around design. It's not a replacement for designers, as you'll see. It's just a tool that gets rid of these endless debates, and especially something I personally despise, which is design by committee. And instead move to let's run a test. Let's get some data. So I'm going to going forward here for the remainder of this little session. I really want to be able to assume that everything you guys are doing is instrumented with analytics. And that absolutely includes mobile apps. That includes tablet apps. It includes if anybody's doing a desktop kind of thing. But it's not just SaaS services. If you're not instrumenting your stuff, you don't deserve any investment, let me just say that. But also, you're in big trouble if you're not. You're flying blind. Honestly, that's to me the one non-negotiable with any feature I work with a team to put in. If they don't have the analytics in for it, it's like, what's the point? We're not going to know if it works anyway. So you absolutely have to be doing that. Their tools are free. I mean, you can pay a lot from Adobe to do it, or you could get it for free from Google. There's tools for not just web services, like I said, but also installed software. There's libraries for that. And I'm hoping several of you are actually doing new generations of those tools, because they are needed. That's what you guys are doing, Send me an email when you have it, because it's just the start of that. But when I find teams that are not instrumenting, I don't get that. Especially since I've personally been doing it for now 30 years. Even back in the dark ages of doing HP's stuff, this was before the internet, but it did something called calling home. So when, once a week or so, it would literally use this piece of junk, dial-up connection, but the servers would call HP and send the analytics data. So it wasn't like it is today where we could get real-time data, but at least we knew what was being used. It shocks me today when I find teams that don't even do that. So I really want to assume you are doing that. And if you're not, talk to these guys. Maybe they'll cut you a deal or something, right? So, but it really is a cultural difference, data over opinions, and get comfortable with that. Another cultural change this way is to change the mindset. One of the reasons I'm such an advocate for agile methods is because I've actually been around before agile methods, and it was a nightmare, the whole waterfall kind of world, which was all about output. Waterfall is all about output. There are lots of different documents, like product requirements and market requirements and functional specs and test plans and bullshit like that. The problem is that's all output. It doesn't say anything about whether you're any good or the stuff we're doing is any good. What matters is outcome, is really what are the results. And so one of the biggest reasons we need analytics for everything is to actually see our progress on outcome. So when I'm working with teams, really, the first thing I always want to know is who are the people on the team that are playing the key roles, because sometimes they're missing some key skill sets. But the second thing I want to do is what are the KPIs, key performance indicator, metrics, analytics, scorecard, whatever you want to call it. In Lean, it's sometimes referred to as innovation accounting. There was a really good book. One of my favorite new books out is called Lean Analytics. I just finished it, and I was so impressed actually with the book. But it's all these are about the results. So it's things like if it's an analytics tool, well, maybe there's a trial for this tool. How many people actually start the trial? How many people actually convert to a paying customer? How many people use it more than one and done, once and then a bail on it? Or e-commerce, how many people are converting? How many people are buying? If it's a mobile payment API, probably care about things called transactions. How many people are actually buying stuff, and how many people are bailing out? How many times are you giving credit errors or whatever it might be? These are the KPIs that matter. Whatever your team is, I don't want to imply that you would all have the same things. They're going to be radically different depending on two big things: what kind of company you have, so what kind of product is it, and also what stage is your product at. Because initially the outcome, honestly, for teams I work with, is an early stage startups, there's only one thing that I really focus on, which is reference customers, because that's the main way we prove minimum viable product is happy referenceable customers. We'll talk about that. The second, but then once they kind of get to MVP, then it becomes more of a discussion about growth. How good is your machine to get more and more customers going? And so the scorecard, the KPIs look different. They're more about growth. They're more about virality, or they're more about churn, how many people leave, that kind of thing. And then eventually teams get to a stage where it's more about monetizing. It's more about pricing tests, for example. And you don't want to get ahead of yourself. I see teams with their precious startup funding blowing the money on marketing campaigns before they even have a product worth spending anything on marketing. So you have to be smart about it, and that's the point, though, of outcome. Focus on outcome. One of the concepts I liked in that book that is this notion of the one metric that matters. I mean, at any given point, there's typically one thing that's the most important KPI. But just remember all of the things. Even though I've talked about Agile, I haven't mentioned yet, but I'm a big fan of continuous deployment. But even things like number of defects. Those are vanity metrics. Those are actually output, not outcome. Outcome is the results. So you could be an awesome team doing continuous deployment and have a great reputation like Etsy's team, but if they're not actually the thing that Etsy does well, have you seen their business growing every year? It's like double to triple for the last several years. Every year, those guys, they're earning it. But it's the outcome that gives those guys such a great reputation, not their output. Hopefully that makes sense. That's an important point. And then I alluded earlier to this notion of design. Now I have to be a little careful here again. You could see the challenge with developer products. If it's a platform service, an API, most of the time those APIs, those are programmatic interfaces, and there will not be a user interface normally. Now some examples, like a payment API that actually brings up its own interface maybe, like PayPal's does, then that does have a user interface. And so that would require designers. But for many developer services, runtime services, those are APIs only. And so those will not include a designer. So when I say design here, I'm referring to the design of the user experience, which is really two big things. It's the interaction, the workflows that users have. Something like content management systems have very complex workflows. And then the visual design. And that actually gets more into the emotional response that people are looking for. One of the things I don't have enough time to, but I hope you'll at least think about it enough to run a test if you're not convinced, is a lot of developers, and I was trained in computer science, which meant I had absolutely no training in user experience design. It was not part of the curriculum. One of the things that kills me is that's still largely true for computer science students. It's not part of the curriculum. And I intuitively, I think, understood interaction design and why that was important, but I will tell you I had to be convinced of the importance of visual design. But all it took was a set of A/B tests to convince me visual design makes a really big difference, even with products for developers. So I think there is this stereotype that says developers don't really care. I don't think that's true, even though you might not get people to say it, but if you do two versions of your product, one with a real visual design, a professional visual design, and one without, I think you'll see noticeable differences in outcome. And that's how you'd test it. So what I'm referring to here is real user experience designers, especially interaction design and visual design. If you're doing a device, and I didn't see any devices on the list, then there's a third, which is industrial design. But this is a big deal, and even despite the success of companies like Apple, it amazes me how few teams understand the importance of designers. And that really bothers me. So I do think you need, and actually I'd say if it means having one less developer on the team in order to have an interaction designer on your team, you should do it. You should do it. It's worth it, especially if you're doing products with complex workflows. And what this point is trying to say is, first of all, get those designers, but second, use them. Don't fall into this model of design by committee where the whole team gets together and wants to push every pixel, and that's not, first of all, it's incredibly slow. Second, there was a book written about how futile this is. It was called The Inmates Are Running the Asylum. Anybody read that book? It was written by a great developer named Alan Cooper, and his point was the reason so many products are so bad is because they're being designed by developers. And he said that with affection, but he's saying, look, developers are not the right people to design the user interfaces. They're the right people to design the systems, the implementation, but not the mental models. And it's a challenge. There are some, have to be careful, there are some developers that are awesome at interaction design. It's just rare. And you probably don't have any. Okay. All right. Yeah, another point gets to, a lot of these are essentially cultural points, but collaboration, great. Consensus, terrible. I'm not trying the consensus basically are a lot of startups feel like they all have to agree before they do anything. And this just, not only does it slow everybody down, but it's really disempowering. Because people want to feel like, okay, they're hired for something, let them do that job. And the point of collaboration is that you have these roles and everybody's responsible for their role. Let them do it. Don't make it so that everybody, again, design by committee is one form of this. So let's first of all talk about who's collaborating. There's really three key roles in product teams, honestly. I mean, there are several other supporting roles as you grow, but there's three key ones. The engineers, somebody's got to build this stuff, and and I also like to emphasize, if you're just using your developers to code, you're only getting about half their value. So this is a big deal. Developers are there for a lot more than just the coding. The reason the other half of the value comes from knowing what is possible and contributing to the actual solution. So that old model where there was somebody called a product manager, or I don't care, could have been a founder, somebody who says these are the requirements. I hate that word requirement because it leads to all the wrong behaviors and thinking. But they say this is what the requirements are. Designer, go make it pretty, and then developers just code. That's waterfall, what I just described, by the way, but that is not what I mean. What I mean is engineers, developer, I use whatever term you want, designer, and product owner, product manager, product owner. To be honest, for early stage startups, it's almost certainly going to be one of your co-founders. But one of those co-founders should sign up to play the product owner role. And those three roles work side by side. I mean, literally, ideally, we say co-located, so sitting right next to each other. They are working together to decide what is that product that we should build, how should it be designed. It is true collaboration. It's a lot of fun, actually. For teams that haven't worked that way, it's a change for them. It's usually really a welcome change, but it's critical. Now, small teams, I don't have to convince you guys. I mean, but small teams is actually a good thing. So don't worry if you think you might be too small there. The other problems come that are often bigger when you grow too fast. And one of the things we love about our new technology stacks is we don't need big teams like we used to. Co-located means you should do everything humanly possible to sit together. It's not that it's impossible to be geographically dispersed. MySQL was a textbook example of proving that a great product can come from a team spread all over the globe. But to be honest, they're the exception to the rule. It really is rare to get that kind of result from a distributed team. So we try hard to co-locate the team. Durable means you don't want people pulled in and out for different projects. It's not how we do things. We have that team working together for the duration, for an extended period of time. So those three key roles side by side, that's what I mean by collaboration. And it should say really over consensus where everybody has to agree, we don't need that, but also over dictatorship. I'm not suggesting anybody, including the co-founder, be like a dictator on this. I'm suggesting that the three are really collaborating. Developers are, like I said, bringing this knowledge of what's possible with the technology. The designers are bringing the knowledge of really how the users think about this problem. And we should also talk about what the product owner or co-founder needs to bring to the table. First, they need to be the expert on your actual users. They have got to be with them every single week, and we can talk about that. Second, they need to be the experts on the data that these users are generating by using your system. Usually they're spending half hour to an hour a day in your favorite analytics package at the beginning of every day to see what's been going on with the very latest tests. So they are the expert in that data. They're also the expert, need to be the expert in or an expert at least in the industry, your competitors, the trends. They also have to take personal responsibility for getting reference customers, meaning, well, we'll talk about what that really means, but it's a big deal. That's what the product owner brings to the table. So those three working together, that's what we mean by collaboration. All right. Another challenge for developer products. And now this is one that is really referring to the platform API kind of products. Probably the single biggest mistake I see platform teams make is optimizing for the developer, which is understandable. They're the ones that are actually using the APIs. They're probably the ones that have to make the decision to use your stuff or not. But the sad thing is, if you just optimize for them at the expense of the end user experience, they will not be using your stuff for long. That's the truth. They won't be using it for long. And we have lots of examples in our industry of things that are awesome for developers, but the end result sucks, and then they die. On the other hand, you can have lots of products. I mentioned Flash. Flash, if any of you actually did ActionScript, right, is what we call it always sucked for developers. And yet it created a great experience for the end user, which is why it grew like crazy. And so it's you have to make sure that you're optimizing for the end user experience over the developer experience. Please don't take that to say your developer experience should be bad. It shouldn't. It's you're not trying to create obstacles, but very often there are trade-offs between the developer experience and the runtime experience for the end users, and you've got to make sure the runtime experience is good. It's like you could have the most beautiful, I don't know who the mobile payments team was, but you could have the most beautiful developer SDKs, you could have fabulous setup for developers, but if that payment service isn't really good for end users, it's a non-starter. And that's a hard thing for a lot of developer teams to get, but it really is true. Pivots, so the planning, the planning kind of refers to the whole idea of the roadmaps and coming up with this is what we're going to do in the first quarter and the second quarter. And to a certain degree, you got to do some of that. But what I'm trying to say here is get into this mode of doing discovery, doing rapid tests and rapid learning. And sometimes the most common thing we decide is just to iterate. We just iterate constantly. Most teams I work with are iterating somewhere between 5 to 15 times every week, okay? 1 to 2, 3 a day iterations. That's normal. Sometimes, though, we run into some real problems, like people aren't buying it, or it's not growing, or whatever. And my point here is be open to the pivot. And I don't, pivot is an overused term right now. And in fact, there's two kinds of pivots. Those pivots, I call vision pivots, when you decide this company idea is not going to fly, and we're going to change the whole company idea. Those are fairly rare, actually. We read about them because companies like, well, Twitter, who else? Facebook, PayPal, these were all vision pivots, actually. But most pivots that happen, by far most of them, are actually discovery pivots. We find that there's a better way to solve the problem. It's the same vision. In fact, there was a great quote from Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, that I love, which is, be stubborn on your vision, but be flexible on the details. And that's my mindset, is that if you're working on something, you'll work on it for years, honestly, to pursue that vision. But you got to be completely flexible on the details. That's why I don't like roadmaps. It locks us into details. I don't want to be locked in, because most of the time we're going to have to change those details. All the features are just details. So be open to that. And the last point is, none of this, I hope you think, is about process. It's really not about process. I don't even care what process. I mean, I care that you're following an agile process, but that's not saying much. You know, there are many, many different ways of being agile. And I don't mean, I mean really agile. To me, really agile means that you are building, integrating, testing, and releasing no less frequently than once every 2 weeks. And if you're not doing that, you're not really getting the benefits of agile. But if you're doing that, and hopefully you're getting to more of a continuous delivery model, which is even better. But that is, that's what I mean. But that's pretty much as I mean about process. It's really not about process. It's about culture. And even there's company culture, there's product culture. I'm really referring to the product culture here. So things like data beats opinions is a cultural thing. This idea of real collaboration, co-located teams, that's a cultural thing. Focusing on outcome, not output, that's a cultural thing. That's what you want to do, especially those of you that are just starting your startup. Putting these this mindset in place now, getting to the point where, well, I mentioned doing at least one iteration a day, making sure that you are testing face-to-face with your developer customers, at least 3 developers a week. I'll just throw that out at you. At least 3 developers a week. And please don't brag about 3 a week. 3 would be incredibly low to me, incredibly low. But if you're not validating your ideas with your actual customers at least on a weekly basis, you're going to be going way too slow. And sad truth is, odds are you're going to run out of money before you get product market fit. That's the sad truth. Most teams I meet, well, I'm brought in by a lot of VCs. Unfortunately, I'm usually brought in right about when they're almost out of money, and that is like they have so little time left. But it's rarely because their idea is bad, rarely because their vision is bad. Most of the time, it's because they literally they were convinced it was going to work, so they just spent all this time building and doing QA and finally pushing something live to find out it's not, and now they're almost out of, and maybe they do that 2 or 3 times. And I'm like, you could have done this in 3 days instead of the last 4 months. And I'm not exaggerating there. I mean, literally, you can do iterations in days, and that's what you want to be good at. The principle of lean startup is very simple. The principle is, what's the fastest, cheapest way to validate our theories or validate our ideas, our hypotheses? And we have lots of techniques today that are set up to do just that. So that's what I mean by culture rather than process. And yeah, there's a book. But more importantly, there is, first of all, you all have my email, which is right there now, and feel free to drop me a note anytime. Also, there is a blog that I am pretty good about. Usually once or twice a month I will do an article that is very much along the topics we're talking about. Anyway, I've been talking at you for a bit. I wanted to open it up and see if you guys have any questions or anything you wanted to ask about. Please. Yeah, it's so not politically correct either to talk about co-location. And like I said, it can work. It's not impossible. So let's talk about plan A, plan B, plan C. I don't want to pretend. If you have the opportunity, if you have the ability to have a small team that is truly co-located, what that means is product owner, designer, developer, tester, co-located. Right there, that close, I promise you it's going to go faster and better. Just full stop. Plan B, though, can't find the people. Too much competition for developers, too much competition for designers. Plan B has product owner, designer, and a senior lead engineer here, co-located, and that lead engineer plays liaison with the developers and testers elsewhere. That actually can work pretty well. You don't get the benefit of all the developers' brains on that sort of inner constant basis, but you get a lot. Plan C, last resort, is that team is truly dispersed, including the lead developer. And that is definitely a distant plan C, because you are not going to get that interaction with the developer that you're going to get in the first two options. And that really does hurt. I even work with companies that do technology to help with this. So I would like to have a better, more politically correct answer, but I don't want to lie to you. And if any of you have had the opportunity to work both ways, it's kind of a no comparison. So you play the hand you're dealt, so you can do things to make, and there is much better technology than ever before to kind of help with remote teams, but there is a synergy that happens when you're right there, and the amount of meetings that you don't need, and it's literally, I see something on the designer's screen and I just talk about it right there, and we get ideas and we go to lunch together, and it's just true. It's just true. And I could actually cite, a lot of, whatever you do, don't do the remote developers because you think you're going to save money, because that is completely not true. They're going to have to be a bigger team. It's going to go slower. You're not going to save money. So that's the lamest reason to do it. The best reason is you've got certain talent there. But even companies like Google that have been doing really good job of spreading, they've been working hard to co-locate teams in those remote locations. In fact, one of the most innovative teams I've ever met, most people think it's a Valley company. It's called Zoho. They think it's a Valley company because that's where their address is, but nobody's there. They're all in Chennai, India. Product, design, engineering, they're all right there in Chennai, and they are an amazing team, but they're co-located. So it's not about Silicon Valley versus India or anything like that. Oh, great question. So this actually lets me mention another favorite little topic of mine, which is Lean UX. You guys heard of Lean UX? There's actually one book out, just okay. I was a reviewer on it. I still say it's just okay. There's a new one coming that I'm more optimistic about. And Lean UX basically says there are two main tools we use to communicate, not big, heavy documents of any sort. One is the prototype is the spec. So you heard me talk about 4 kinds of prototypes, and one of the benefits is they literally say prototype as spec. That works quite well. For most co-located startups, that's all you need. and the rest we talk about. The other technique that's pretty popular is story maps. And a story map is a technique both for design but also for communicating the actual backlog. One way of describing, I mentioned dual track, discovery track, delivery track. The purpose of discovery track is to generate a product backlog. Purpose of delivery track is to get that stuff live. So that's really what it was usually put on the backlog. To your point, user stories and prototype. Good. Not such an easy question, of course. And the other thing I should have said about analytics, because I don't want to leave the impression that you kind of set it up and then you're done. The truth is you are working on the analytics every single sprint. You're constantly realizing, we don't know what's happening here. We need to add some instrumentation here. We need to add some tagging here. And then we'll do that, and then we'll start collecting that data. And so it's a moving target, constantly a moving target. Probably the short answer, which is why I like that book so much, I mentioned called Lean Analytics, is that it describes 6 kinds of companies, internet companies. See if I can remember them. E-commerce, marketplaces, mobile apps, SaaS software. I feel like I'm missing 1 or 2, but those were there were 6. Those were the main ones that I can remember. And for each of those types of companies, they described the analytics that they think you should really pay attention to. And then they went one step further that really impressed me, although I'm not sure how long the book will be relevant because of this. They actually included current good numbers, meaning if you're an e-commerce company in this stage, this is actually a good number to shoot for. And that's incredibly valuable. I know some anecdotal from working with some companies, but they did a survey of a bunch of companies, and I found that incredibly valuable. So the short answer is I would start with that and adjust it as you need it. And just remember, it's a non-stop thing. You're always adding, digging, refining. So I wish you all the best of luck. Thank you very much.